Good morning, hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Stuart Clough and I'm a Communications Manager here at Moorepay, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the topic for you for this session, which is part of our HR Essentials series and particularly topical for this time of year. It's the Christmas Party Survival Guide. Now, before we get into the main agenda, there's just a couple of housekeeping points. One is that we have 99, not red balloons, we have 99 registered attendees for this session. So to keep things manageable, we like to keep mics muted so that we don't have any interruptions, etc. So there's just myself and Michelle you'll be hearing today. But that doesn't mean that you can't contact us. So you'll find on the panel and the viewing platform that you're looking at, that you'll have a chat box and also a questions box. Now you can use the chat box to drop us any questions or anything that relates to the recording itself, or any problems you're having, and we can pick them up and we can respond either privately or publicly there. But separately, the questions box. Now this is a really important bit for the webinar. We're really keen that you get as much value out of this as you can. So any questions you've got, specific, general, influenced by anything that you hear in the webinar, or from your own experience or perspective, or something that's cropped up that we've not covered, whatever it is that you'd like to ask on this session today, please drop your questions into the question box and we'll pick them up in the Q&A session. Okay, so structure of the webinar itself, I'll just take you through a couple of things about Moorepay itself, because I know some of you will not be familiar with the organization. Then I'll introduce our excellent host today, and then after the main body of the session, we'll come to the Q&A period. So probably about 25 minutes for the main part of the session, and then 10 to 15 minutes of the Q&A. Okay, so that's the key bits of the housekeeping. And as I say, any issues or anything you're having, so just please drop it in the chat box, and we'll pick them up there. Okay, so just a little bit about Moorepay. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Moorepay, we're a payroll and HR solutions business. We've been in the game for 50 years, well 52 years actually. We celebrated our half century a couple of years ago. We've got 10,000 customers across the UK. We between ourselves and our sister company, NGA UK, who tend to serve bigger businesses. Between us, we pay 1 in 6 of the UK workforce. So we're, I think that's 18%, or 18% of the tax take from PAYE is down to us as a business. So I think we're a business that touches a lot of other businesses across the country, is what I'm saying, I guess. And in terms of our HR service and facilities, we do an awful lot of solutions. So we have a HR software platform, we offer employment law, we have advocacy, we have consultancy service, we offer insurance, we do people analytics, health and safety. Essentially any service, any technology that businesses need, particularly SME businesses, to help them support their people. Moorepay have the service and offer it, and as you'd expect, we're industry accredited to our eyeballs. So I mean, particularly for our HR services element, we're CIP qualified, and health and safety we have CHAS, we have CHIE, we have NEBOSH, IOSH, lots of OSHs and lots of logos to go alongside it. But rest assured, we're the market leader in HR and payroll services to small businesses. And if you want to find out more about us, of course, just go on the web, Google Moorepay, or go to moorepay.co.uk, and you'll find us there, and lots of information about our services, solutions, and such forth. And if you want to get on the phone, do the old traditional way, then you'll find the number there, 0845 073 0260. Okay, so that's a little bit about Moorepay. But now I'll tell you a little bit about today's host, which is Michelle Hobson, our HR Technology and Services Director. She joined Moorepay in 2017. It feels like she's been here a long time. She's responsible for running all the HR services activities in Moorepay. That's all our technology, our HR and employment law, our consultancy service. All of that is happily on Michelle's head. And she has an awful lot of experience in this area, both on the client side, as I'd call it, and also on the consultative side as well. So 15 years of operational and strategic HR experience, and well understanding of all the challenges the HR professionals face. Everything, you know, from your bread and butter employment law problems to TUPEs to everything in between. And as you'd expect, obviously CIPD qualified. You can connect with Michelle by email, and you can see her details there. But also, you know, find her on LinkedIn. She's very friendly, very amenable, as we're about to find out. And you can pick up any bits of conversation with Michelle. She's always willing to talk, as indeed she's about to do now. So without further ado, allow me to hand over to Michelle, who will take you through today's topic, your Christmas party survival guide.
Thank you very much. So we've just got about 20-25 minutes to go through this topic. It's very current at the moment. I'm sure we're all in the mad swing of Christmas and Christmas parties. But I do feel that this can be an area for small businesses that is quite confusing about where your responsibilities lie, how to handle if things go wrong, whilst balancing the fact that you want to reward your employees and make sure everyone has fun. So I hope that this session will give you some insight on that. And then if you've got any further questions that we don't get a chance to answer today, then we'll either come back to you or please feel free to connect with me. So just to talk about the agenda then, we're going to go through roles and responsibilities as an employer, do's and don'ts for hosting Christmas parties, a particularly tricky topic around romances, relationship or unwanted advances, and what can happen at Christmas party when alcohol is flowing and barriers are reduced slightly, how to handle any fallout should things go wrong, but hopefully if you put things in place that will minimise the risk. We'll do a Q&A at the end, and then we'll talk about some additional Moorepay content that's available that could help you. So in terms of your roles and responsibilities as an employer in terms of Christmas parties or works dues in general, I think there's sometimes a confusion about the blurry lines between work at home when you're dealing with social events with colleagues. However, there's a general consensus and very clear guidance in employment law that you as an employer are vicariously liable for the behaviour of your employees at work social events. And whether that's funded by you, part funded, or even in the case where it's just organised by you. And this can extend to pre and post parties. So whilst rules may relax when the drinks are flowing, you've still got to remember that there are rules to follow. And the behaviour that you would expect in work, you should see that outside of work as well. And you really should see your Christmas party as almost an extension of the workplace. And before I go on to tell you about how you do balance this and the do's and don'ts, and you make sure that rules are followed and people behave whilst also having fun, I'd like you to bear in mind this case that has happened recently, which is Bellman versus Northampton Recruitment. Now, this may be something you've seen in the press, as it's had quite a lot of press coverage. The actual incident happened a couple of years ago, back in 2016, but it's just been to the Court of Appeal now, so this has been a lengthy case that is going on. But essentially, if I can give you the background to the case and what has happened, but there was an altercation at an after party to a Christmas party that Northampton Recruitment held. And Mr. Bellman, who was an employee of Northampton Recruitment, was assaulted by the managing director, Mr. Major, and it left him with significant brain injuries. It was quite a serious assault. The incident occurred after a row broke out at around 3 AM, and it was over terms given to a new employee that Mr. Bellman was objecting to. He questioned the MD, Mr. Major's decisions. This led to an argument which eventually turned into an altercation, and Mr. Major left, as I said, Mr. Bellman with some significant injuries. At the initial tribunal that was heard, the court ruled that Northampton Recruitment were not liable for the actions of Mr. Major. However, the Court of Appeal have ruled otherwise and completely overturned this. And the main points they've considered in reaching a decision was, first of all, the significance of Mr. Major's job. He was the most senior person at the company and therefore the most senior person at the party. And even though the fact that the incident had happened or what was deemed to be a follow-on of the official company party, it had a serious impact on it. It has a significant impact, this ruling, because it helps employers understand their liability, particularly to do with after parties. And the thing that you need to know in this case is that the company had paid towards this after party. So when the official party had ended and they all carried on somewhere else, Mr. Major, the MD, actually paid for the taxis to the after party, and he also paid for drinks while he was there. So this was deemed to be an extension of the original party. And the other thing that was really important here is that because the issue and the altercation took place around a work topic, the MD was deemed to be wearing, and this was the words of the judge, his MD hat at the time of the incident, because the topic of discussion that had led to the altercation was work related. And therefore the overall thing was that the court ruled that Northampton Recruitment were liable for the behaviour of its staff at this event, including the MD. And there was quite a hefty payout given, which also took into account the serious injuries that were given. And this is a complete extreme example of something that can happen, but I think it's important that businesses understand the effects that some of these things can have. So how do we help you avoid being in that situation then, is essentially what we want to talk you through now. And in the short time that we've got available, I just want to call out some of the key topics. So in terms of do's and don'ts, I think one of the first things that you need to ensure is that you've got the right policies and procedures in place that talk about how you expect your staff to behave in general at work. And if you've got these in place, there needs to be a clause in it that it can extend to work organised parties. So all the things that you list in misconduct and gross misconduct policies, they should also cover out of work parties. I think in particular reference to a Christmas party, it's really important that you set expectations to your employees about what's acceptable. And if I can take our own company example, who've recently had their Christmas party, this could just be a 2-line statement in an email about the kind of the logistics of the party, just to remind employees that we want everybody to have fun, but let's make it a night to remember for the right reasons and to remember that they are still representing the company when they are on this works due. I think it's also important to call out that leaders and managers should be setting the right example. If leaders and managers are behaving as the MD did in that case, then that sets the wrong tone for the rest of the organisation. I think another trick to do is just keep an eye on what's going on in social media. You can often find out things that have happened at the Christmas parties by social media, and it's important that you've kind of got a view of that. In social media in general, obviously there's a whole different topic on how you deal with that, but the fact that people put things on social media means that it is not private anymore. And if you happen to stumble across a post of one of your employees just because somebody else you knew liked it, then because you found out about something through that way doesn't mean you don't have to act on it. So it's just being aware and keeping on top of it all. And the final do on there is just be prepared to deal with any inappropriate behaviour, whether that's on the night or whether it's afterwards. Don't be afraid to tackle something because it happened outside of the official workplace. The don'ts then, I think, although people like having excessive or unlimited alcohol, this can be a downfall in Christmas parties. So just think about how you handle this in terms of drinks. Do you just give a token for a few drinks? Do you allow them to buy their own drinks and potentially put your money into other things like raffle prizes to make it slightly different? Just think about how you are expecting the night to go. As a business and as somebody of significance in a business, whether you're a HR person or whether you are a manager or a leader in the business, try not to get drawn into work discussions. There is nothing worse than when someone's had a few drinks and wants to talk to you about the pay rise they didn't get, or wants to talk to you about the woes that they have with another person. That is not the time to discuss it, and try and push people to one side in terms of saying, we can talk about this. If it's really an issue, we'll talk about it when we get to work on Monday. And another don't is don't forget about health and safety. When you're picking a venue, choosing what you're going to do, just think about where it is. Think if you have picked a wonderful country house to have a works party in, but that's quite remote, how are people going to get home from there? Is it somewhere that taxis can get to easily? Can you organise taxis so that they can get home safely? Is it in a place where people will be safe? Just try not to forget about those things. But then I think you have to override this all with the balance piece, which is remember to enjoy yourselves. Christmas parties are a great engagement piece for employees, and for you to say thank you, to celebrate, to reward, to help them relax in the run up to the Christmas period. And everything that we're saying today is kind of thinking of worst case scenarios. So it's just about balancing those two areas. The next topic then is a particularly difficult one to discuss, but I think it's really important that we call this out because it can be the source of many issues and concerns at Christmas parties. And I think the combination of alcohol and relaxed boundaries at a Christmas party can not only result in drunken arguments, but it can also give rise to a much more serious kind of misconduct, which is sexual harassment, which basically is any kind of unwanted sexual advances. I think the thing to point out first of all is that drunken flirting will probably always occur at a Christmas party. And I think you'll find that many relationships that develop at work have actually started at some kind of Christmas party. And my opinion is that there's very little point in trying to make an outright ban on workplace romances because this often encourages secrecy, which makes situations much more difficult to deal with. And for the most part, a casual fling between two consenting adults or a relationship that develops because of a Christmas party is not a problem within work and often a private matter between two individuals, but provided that it is consensual and provided that the parties remain professional. So I think we need to underpin this with you need to accept that employee romances, relationships, or even just a fling will happen, particularly at parties such as Christmas ones. But then the more sort of sinister side of this is you need to ensure that you remember your duty of care towards employees, and it should be at the forefront of your mind and abundantly clear to all your employees in work and out of work at a party. In general, you need to make sure that you've got right policies and procedures in place which explicitly state that this kind of behaviour in terms of sexual harassment in any context is completely unacceptable and potentially gross misconduct. And your employees must know what's expected of them, but the business should set the right tone. You need to make sure that you encourage people to be open and honest about things that are happening or concerns that it's got. And I do think that this is never more important than at a Christmas party where sometimes boundaries and inhibitions are lowered. If you think about the Me Too campaign, this highlights this issue in a global reach. And although it's been born out of a potentially deep-rooted issue within specific industries, it's created a platform across all kinds of businesses and all aspects of life. And it reaffirms that unwanted contact or conduct of a sexual nature is not okay in any circumstances. And I think it's really important to make sure that if this worst case scenario ever happened, that your employees would feel safe raising this to you and that it would be dealt with. So in the event then that things do go wrong, what can you do to appease it? I think the first thing that I would say is to try and stay alert on the night. There may be a little bit of an argument that breaks out. And if you as a HR or a manager or a leader in the business can spot that and diffuse that on the night by just separating the parties, then I think that sometimes that goes a long way and it turns into something that is not a big deal. I wouldn't be afraid of asking employees to leave. If you think someone has overstepped the mark on the night and they don't back down or don't just agree to go to the other side of the room away from that person, I think you have a duty to potentially ask them to leave if that's the only way you can diffuse the situation on the night. But it's all around acting immediately. If something happens that comes to your attention after the party has happened, then it's important that as soon as you know about it, you act immediately. Now, what you do about that will depend on what has happened and the seriousness of that act. If it was just a bit of a drunken argument, could an informal chat with that individual diffuse the situation? If it's involving two people and you think there may be a strain on their working relationship going forward, could you offer some kind of workplace mediation just to kind of get them over it and move them forward? Or if it is something serious where an employee comes to you and there was either a physical altercation or there was potentially some unwanted sexual advances or contact, then don't be afraid to go for the full thing of suspending for a potential gross misconduct investigation. And at that point, you would treat it as if it was any other gross misconduct investigation. The fact that it happened in a works party outside of the core working hours would not matter. And you, as I said before, have got a duty to make sure you act upon it. I think the real key thing, though, before we get into sort of the Q&A, is just it's all about balance. There is the big piece of you having a duty of care as an employer, and it's important that you remember that, and you are responsible for ensuring that your employees are safe as you are in work. But then these individuals are adults who are responsible for their own behaviour. And that's where you would then flip it to a procedure that you would follow normally. But it's about balancing, as I said before, with having fun together, celebrating successes, a real boost for employee engagement, rewards, celebrating, that kind of thing. And it's just about trying to get that balance. It's not easy, but I think if you've got the right policies and procedures in place about what behaviour is expected, you reaffirm that to all your employees before you have your Christmas party, you've kind of done everything you can to mitigate it happening, you diffuse anything you can on the night, you stay alert to what's going on, but then in the unfortunate event that something does go wrong, you act on it immediately. But hopefully you can balance that and it wouldn't particularly be an issue in the end. Because you yourselves as managers and leaders will be wanting to kind of have fun and let your hair down as well. So that's the main part of the presentation done. So what I'd like to do is open it up to any questions.
Brilliant. Let's see what we've got. So again, if you any questions that you've got, sorry, just first of all, thanks, Michelle.
No worries.
I really enjoyed listening to that. Yes, questions. I'm sure there's many. I'm sure you have plenty. As I say, if you can please just drop them in the question box on the in the panel on the side there, then we'll be able to pick them up and work through them in an orderly fashion. As I say, any questions related to anything within this topic, anything that's specific or personal to your business, obviously maybe avoid putting any too personal details in there, but specific business problems you've got, or any questions you want to ask more broadly, and say please drop them in the questions box, and we'll be able to work through them. A couple we've already had come in. One of these, Michelle, looking at the social media angle, and we're saying someone's asked if they. So you mentioned the social media posts and how you can look at their social media and pick up on things that are happening during the night. If someone was to not look at the social media, to actively avoid seeing incriminating posts, is that an effective or a sensible way of avoiding any responsibility for those kind of?
I don't think it's necessarily about avoiding responsibility. I think small businesses have a responsibility that they can't avoid. I don't think you should go trawling through social media the next day and turn yourself into a detective. But if you happen to come across something that you think is important to deal with in the workplace, the one thing to remember about social media, you will often find that employees will use the defence. That is my personal social media account. You shouldn't have seen that. We all know how social media works and Facebook, and even if a friend of a friend likes a post, you can end up seeing the post of someone that you're not friends with. And the important point that I've always spoken about and kind of lived by in terms of rules of social media is it isn't private. If you as an individual or an employee put something on social media, you are putting it into the public domain, and it actually in most instances doesn't matter what your privacy settings are. It is out there now in the public domain, and if it comes to the attention of an employer, then we need to deal with it. And if it's something that's serious, if it's drunken pictures of people being silly, that's fine, but if there's something serious that was raised on there, then I don't think you should try and deflect from your responsibilities.
Right. I think that's pretty clear. So, okay, next question. As an employer, what can I do to limit my liability from an altercation at Christmas do?
I think there's only so much you can do. As I said before, these are responsible adults, responsible for their own behaviour. It's putting in all those practices that I mentioned at the beginning, the do's, the don'ts, the setting expectations, having right policies and procedures in place, and being aware on the night. If you put all those things in place and an altercation still happens and it's serious enough that you feel to deal with it, you would be applauded in a tribunal for everything that you'd put in to try and mitigate that happening.
Okay, that's pretty strong. Let's see what other questions we've got coming through. Please continue to post them, by the way, and then we can continue to pick them up and work through. One here, do you have a sample email we can adapt to send to all employees?
Yes, I'm sure we could pull something together. As I said, we've done one for ourselves recently. My opinion is that you keep it quite brief and breezy and bright, that we don't want to be listing a whole set of rules of do's and don'ts, because your problem is if you try and list out everything you should and shouldn't do, then you'll miss something and you're being too specific. But we have got something that we can pull together and we can email out an answer.
Excellent. Okay.
I think we just had another one come in asking, what should I do if there are rumours about things that happened at the party, but I'm not sure what exactly happened? That can be quite difficult to deal with because it may just be gossip or hearsay, or it may be something that you need to get involved in. What I would suggest is trying to find out a bit more and have informal chats with people that it's either named or raised. Because what you don't want to do, if it is just some small gossip about something not so significant, you'll very quickly get to the bottom of that. But if you think there is something serious that has gone on as a result of those rumours, like something around unwanted sexual conduct, then you need to get to the bottom of it. And the fact that it was a rumour and it came to your attention would not be enough in court. However the information comes to you, whether it's a rumour, something you happen to come across on social media, the fact that it's now known to you means that as a business you have to deal with it, and I think that's the most important thing.
Right. Okay. Follow-up question on the template. We'll send a template email as part of the follow-up to this.
Yes, we're being asked, could we have the template by tomorrow? So I'm guessing someone's got an impending Christmas party. Absolutely fine. We will do everything to help that.
So we will follow. Yes. Yes, we will follow it up. This morning after the webinar. Okay. Okay, another question is coming. So employees' partners are also invited to our Christmas party. What is the best way to handle this if anything should arise?
Yeah, this is difficult because you don't have an employment relationship with this person. That's very distinctive in law. So you have an employment relationship. I think there's a small part that means your employment relationship is with the individual, not the partner. But then the partner really should be responsible for how their partner behaves. Your employee should be responsible for how their partner behaves. If it's something on the night, then again, I would deal with the employee and ask them rather than dealing with the person direct. If it's something that either happened on the night or came to your attention afterwards, think about what actions you could take. But if it was serious enough, and I guess this extends to employees as well, if something very serious happened and you don't have an employment relationship, but you think that it was something that would be worthy of reporting to the police, then that would be the best route, although you would hope that that's the most extreme example. Remember that your responsibility and relationship is with the employee, but they by default are responsible for their partner's behaviour on the night. So whilst if something serious happened, you wouldn't necessarily be able to take action against that employee. It's just thinking about how you get to that individual. It's quite a tricky one, that.
Good question. Good question. So not exactly a follow-on, but a similar theme, perhaps. I don't know. Is it appropriate to dismiss someone after a Christmas party?
Yes, it can be, depending on the circumstances. And in my many years in HR, I've had the unfortunate task of dismissing a few people after Christmas parties for things that are quite serious, for the two main topics of physical altercation and unwanted sexual conduct. And you've, as I said before, you followed that in exactly the same way that you would do any other gross misconduct. So once they were back in work, they were both separate incidents, separate years, they were suspended, a full investigation took place that then led on to a disciplinary, which ultimately led to both of their dismissals. So it is appropriate, and you would follow it in the same way depending on what happened.
And so, and in terms of the timing around that, then it'd be something you pick up at
It's something you do not pick up in terms of any kind of grievance or disciplinary investigation on the night. That is not appropriate, and especially if you yourself had a drink as well, that's not really advisable. What I would do is come away from that party, and then first thing the morning after or the Monday morning, deal with it there and then as you would do. And if it is a potential gross misconduct, you would suspend them whilst you're investigating.
Right. Keep your questions coming in. I actually have a question I'd like to ask.
Okay,
at this
go
point.
for
it. On behalf of employers everywhere, is it advisable or sensible that a member of a senior leadership team should remain as the designated
driver?
Yeah, that's right.
If you read a lot of articles, that is one suggestion, is that you keep somebody as a senior member who isn't drinking, and that could be a good way to deal with it. You've got somebody there who is almost in charge, keeping a sober eye on it. That isn't always practical because you've got to decide who it is. So I wouldn't say it's a must. It would be advisable. But I think it's about those senior members themselves just being aware and potentially, not drinking as much as they might do if they were out with their friends, and remembering that they are senior people in the organisation. I think that can be enough. But if you have somebody in the organisation who could act as that person, then that may be quite a good thing to happen.
Right. I would wanted that question answered. Thanks for that. Any more questions? We've run out on the list. Just got one come in. Am I, as an employer, responsible or liable in the event of a sexual assault at a work do?
You would be responsible in terms of the employment side of it. So a serious sexual assault at a work do, I would imagine, would involve the police, and there would be a separate police investigation. But you still have a responsibility to make a decision around the employment of that individual. Now, that can be difficult if they're going through a police process at the same time, but it shouldn't stop you dealing with it. And you are expected to run that investigation the same way that you would. And even if that individual's not gone to trial and it's not happened yet, you would be expected to deal with that quicker and make a decision based on the information you've got and the balance of probabilities, because you have a responsibility to the alleged victim in that. But I would imagine that would cross over with a police process, but there's still an employment relationship. So if you had a very serious police incident that was going on outside of work, you've got to think about how are those two people going to continue working together, either in the same office. But that would be the sort of thing where I would definitely advise getting specific advice on that specific case from somewhere like our advice line.
Right. Okay. Another question come in. Thank you, Rachel. How do you distinguish between a company after party and a group of colleagues simply carrying on?
I think if you go back to that case at the beginning, the fact that the after party by Northampton Recruitment, the MD funded the taxis there and then funded the drinks there. That was seen as an extension of the Christmas party, because he had organised a Christmas party, had essentially paid for it, and then was paying for the after party as well. Colleagues will generally go on afterwards and may carry on. If it is in their kind of own time of their own volition and they are completely paying for it themselves, then your liability lessens. Again, it'd be one of those where you'd need to go into the very specific detail to make a full decision. But I would say your liability lessens if it's something that they've just done of their own volition.
Right. Okay. Any more questions? Thank you, Lucy. Let's have a look. If we are providing alcohol at a party, is the employer responsible for providing transport home?
No, you don't have to provide transport home. It's just, I would say it's advisable to make sure that you are somewhere that people can easily get a taxi home from, or a train or a bus, and and when you've thought about the venue that you're picking, that you've thought about how people can get home. But you're certainly not responsible for providing transport home. I just think in terms of your duty of care, you need to have thought that it is easily accessible. So as I said, if you've got a country house that is in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing, and it's miles to the next town or bus stop or train station, then that's quite difficult. So think, is it accessible? But you're certainly not responsible for making sure everyone gets home, because again, you've got to think that they are adults responsible for their own behaviour. Just putting things in place before.
Brilliant. Okay. We'll probably close the questions there unless there's any more. I'll give you 5 seconds. Ooh, you just beat the buzzer there, Sean. Are we liable for people driving to work the next morning?
This is a really, really one you need to think about. Wherever possible, it's good to have it on a non-working, where there's no work the next day. You are not responsible for people driving to work the next day. That is an individual decision who they have to decide whether they are going to get up and get in a car the next morning. If it is a party you're having on a works night, I think that may be something that you could include in the email. And when we sort of tickle up the draft of the email, I'll put in a clause in there that you can take out if it's not applicable to you. And I think it's just reminding people of their responsibilities the next morning, to think about, if I'm going to be drinking the night before, how am I going to get home? And again, I think that would massively lessen your liability in that instance. You don't have to make sure that people get into work by taxis or what have you the next morning. Again, they can choose or choose not to drink. They are the ones making the decision. But it is really a good idea to have mentioned that if you are doing a works night one. So we'll add that into the email.
Brilliant, excellent question, thank you. Right, I think we'd better close off the questions there. So we'll just move on to a few other things. So always keen to point out, so we'll circulate a recording of the webinar and this email template to everyone afterwards, and also a copy of the slides as well, so you have all those elements. But I should say there's a whole host of additional content that you'll find on the Moorepay resources section on our website. So if you go to moorepay.co.uk and you look at the top, there's a section called resources. You'll find heaps and heaps of further information on employment law. We've got white papers on a whole host of topics. We have our webinar program that is always running, although we will be taking a break, I believe, after the end of this week until the new year. But we'll be back again in the new year with a whole host of additional topics. But as I say, there's guides. We do monthly guides, there's quarterly guides on payroll and employment law and HR legislation. We do mini guides and legislation explainers on particular topics, like whether that's calculating holiday entitlement or understanding the landscape after the abolition of tuition fees, tribunal fees. So lots of additional content there. So as I say, please go to the resources page. It's all free. Go download it. There's lots more there. And if you don't find something you're looking for and you want something specific, then please let us know, because we're always keen to be guided by what would be most helpful and beneficial for our audiences. Okay, so that's additional content you'll find there, and you can also obviously pick up on that if you go follow us on any of our regular social sites. Just search for Moorepay and you'll find us in there. And we publish all our new content, our blogs and our guides and everything. You'll see them all flash up on your social stream. Obviously, you can call us anytime. There's a phone number there, but you go to the website, you'll see it as well. And you can also email us if you're interested in products and services. Email sales. If you're interested in any other topic whatsoever, just email info@moorepay.co.uk and we'll get that through to the right person. So that's Moorepay. That's HR Essentials, your Christmas party survival guide. I hope you found it helpful. I hope there's been a lot of information and insight in there. So for me, finally, just to say thank you to joining us. Thank you to Michelle for hosting the webinar today and for answering your questions. And as I say, we'll follow up after close this webinar this morning with the email template and the slides and a copy of the recording of this webinar. Okay, have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you.